It's official.
A question I've gotten a few times in the wake of my dissections of Shao Kahn's character has been what I think of his depiction in the TV series Mortal Kombat Conquest. And to be honest, it's a fair question. It's probably one of the most significant live-action depictions of the character, right alongside the Annihilation version, which this one is actually based on. Mortal Kombat Conquest is a prequel to the original 1997 film, and features the Great Kung Lao as its lead, along with his new allies, Taja the Thief and Zero the Bodyguard. Together, they deal with the aftermath of winning the Mortal Kombat tournament as villains like Shang Tsung and Shao Kahn scheme to get rid of them with a new plot each episode, with the beginning and ending both being two-parters. The big highlight of the show, frankly, is the fight choreography. Every battle has so much energy and acrobatics in it that each fight is captivating to watch. But this isn't a critical dive into the show as a whole. I'm here to answer one question: is this the best live-action depiction of Shao Kahn, or even the best depiction in all of Mortal Kombat media outside of the original games? Well, let's have a look. One thing I'll admit right off the bat is that I've religiously watched the finale of this show multiple times. You can watch Felon Porteous's review of this episode and the entire show if you want to know about all the logical inconsistencies and the plot holes, and for the most part, it's all true. The thing is, the things that work in this episode work so well I don't care. It's definitely a shut my brain off sort of mentality that I approach this episode with, but the sheer epicness, the scale, accentuated by the score that needs an official release, gives me chills every time I watch it.
I am Rain, God of Thunder! Protector of Earthrealm.
For a brief synopsis, for those of you that don't know and want to know, Vengeance is the 22nd episode of the show and the series finale. It directly follows the previous episode where the protagonists learn about a hidden city populated by a cult, worshipping a god they call Shaka, who was said to eventually come to the Earth and take his followers to the far land. As you may have guessed, this cult was actually worshipping Shao Kahn, and the city was located where he had placed a hidden portal he could use to cross to Earthrealm. That episode ends with Raiden appearing and confronting Shao Kahn at his end of the portal as the Emperor makes his appearance and the two face off. Vengeance opens at that exact same moment, with Raiden calling out to Kahn telling him to bow, and the two entering the portal into a nexus space between the realms where the two exchange words throughout the episode. It will cut between these dialogues in several subplots between the remaining cast members while the heroes figure out what they're going to do. Everybody ends up getting killed off by the Shadow Priests, and it ends with a climactic battle between Shao Kahn and Raiden, wherein he ends up outsmarting the Thunder God by transporting the two of them into Outworld, where Raiden's powers are useless. So Shao Kahn wins, everyone's dead, and there's no hope for salvation. To be honest, that's a pretty ballsy ending to any series. And while there was supposed to be a season 2, the show was never renewed, so this became our ending. Honestly, problems aside, I love it. Anyone who's seen any of my previous Mortal Kombat videos, or even just some of the thumbnails, know that I'm a huge Shao Kahn fan. So seeing a version of the world where the Emperor defeated all of his enemies in just one was immensely satisfying to me, especially in the age where he's been reduced to a bumbling buffoon who constantly bitches and whines about how puny Earthrealmers are, despite being defeated by them every single time the tournament between Earthrealm and Outworld rolls around. The dude can win wars and conquer entire planes, but just can't manage to beat a dude whose greatest level of excitement is a farm off with his best friend to see who pays for dinner that day. Man, I can't go one video without a NetherRealm Khan rant, can I? Back on topic, by the time this show released, the latest game that hit the market was Mortal Kombat 4, with the series' most forgettable antagonist until Kronika, so naturally it focused on the series' most prominent antagonist to date. Now, when establishing a major villain, I feel like it's important to set a precedent for how threatening they actually are. Conquest actually does a pretty good job of this. We get an opening monologue from Raiden himself as he explains who our protagonist is and the stakes he faces. If he loses here to Shao Kahn's mightiest servant, he will claim the realm as part of his own domain. We see just how skilled and powerful Shang Tsung is with his first battle, and even this man immediately backpedals in fear after accidentally talking back to the Emperor. We see just how ruthless he is as well, as the moment Shang Tsung is defeated, he calls for his immediate death. He is no longer of any use now that he is a loser, especially as he was so close to his ultimate victory. The next time we see him is in the same episode, with a wonderfully menacing shot of his palace and a score befitting the scene. Shang Tsung is dragged before the Emperor, and we see that he's clearly been getting tortured, presumably since getting dragged back to Outworld. Then we get this incredible moment where we see the true depth of his rage as the sorcerer pleads for his torment to end.
Great Shao Kahn, end this now.
How dare you beg for death!
Wow. Chills. From here on, he's involved in a few Scheme of the Week plots, but the next majorly important appearance he has is in Episode 5, The Essence. He's having an Edenian servant girl tortured for information regarding an important item that has the potential to restore the life and vitality of Edenia. Another Edenian woman, not Jade, is brought in to answer some questions, and we get one of my absolute favorite lines from any version of Shao Kahn.
I doubt my stepdaughter's loyalty. Why not yours?
Because there is no reason.
No reason! I assume treachery. Loyalty, I question.
This is something that I feel like perfectly encapsulates the character we know as Shao Kahn. Even in the games, he has a very unique perspective compared to the other villains. He's the only one who actually usurped his previous master and had to worry about others trying to do the same to him. Onaga was a ruler, and he never had this concern until it was too late. Shang Tsung and Quan Chi were both servants themselves, and only ever aspired to reach higher, no matter who they had to step over. The only other character who shared Khan's unique perspective as one who both rules and has been ruled is Shinnok. While technically never having his throne taken from him, he was betrayed by his subordinate and did end up taking the Netherrealm throne from Lucifer. I may not be explaining this very well, but basically, Shao Kahn has the perspective of both one who has had aspirations to rule and take the throne from another, as well as someone in that position of authority and power. Something that's fairly unique to him, as the other villains have either never been challenged or didn't survive when they were, or have only ever aspired for more and never actually achieved a seat of power on his level. As a result, he doesn't have the same hubris as Onaga and is capable of seeing through and predicting the desires of others like Shang Tsung. Enough so that he doesn't let his grip on his power fall through so easily. It makes things like the deception retcon make more sense when examined under that lens. My point being that so far this show has established a very strong characterization for Kahn. He's shown to be extremely powerful and dangerous, dominant and imposing, as well as cautious of those around him, always making sure he's one step ahead of everyone around him so he doesn't get blindsided. Even though he has more power than anyone would know what to do with, he doesn't let that go to his head until he does, and always keeps it in the back of his mind that at any point, someone can and will make a play for his throne, so he prepares accordingly. Another topic of relevance to this particular version of Shao Kahn is his relationship with Kitana. For those that don't know the story, Kahn conquered Kitana's home realm Edenia and killed her father, King Jared. How old she was at the time is heavily debated because the question is often brought up on why she was loyal for so long if she was aware these events had taken place. In MK9, it was established that she didn't know, leading one to believe she was very young by the time he claimed her and her mother as his wife and daughter, or she was brainwashed. In this continuity, however, she is well aware of that fact and makes no pains to ensure Kahn knows it as well. She seems to rather obviously detest him, yet he never lays a hand against her and even treats her very amicably. Every time they're on screen together, there's a palpable tension in the air for a multitude of reasons. Kitana's mother is dead, and it seems clear that Kahn would rather have Kitana as his queen rather than his adoptive daughter, even outright saying she would be better suited to sit by his side on the throne.
You look lovely here, near the throne. What a magnificent empress you would make.
I'm not really sure how to feel about these scenes. This is a very different dynamic than the one often seen between Kitana and Kahn. In the comics, he held a similar sort of affection for her, but he very clearly only wanted her to be his daughter and nothing more, to the point that he constantly erases her memories whenever she discovers the truth of her origin just to keep her at his side, despite the fact he says this has already happened multiple times. In this, he seems to want her entirely, and comes close to crossing that boundary multiple times, but then in the same breath will put her on the spot questioning her loyalties to him. It's honestly an interesting dynamic. The way Kitana is almost like a forbidden fruit he can never have, but also being unwilling to take the steps to remove her as a threat despite his admitted distrust of her. It even culminates in a scene in the finale while Shao Kahn is gloating to Raiden after killing off all the major characters. When he gets to Kitana, he almost skips over it, lingering on her fan as though lamenting the loss of someone genuinely important to him. He's obsessed with Kitana, to the point of offering Mileena the chance to take her place as long as she's loyal, but is also very aware that he can't trust her. Despite that, he's almost obligated to keep her around for an assortment of reasons.
You've suspected Kitana for years, yet you never harmed her?
It suited my purposes. She's a powerful symbol to the Adidas.
But there's another reason, isn't there? Darker and more personal than politics that keeps you from her.
She is my enemy!
Episode 15 is probably Shao Kahn at his dumbest, though. His character has been established very well up to this point. Though he is prone to anger, as any tyrant would be, he is meticulous and clever with his schemes. For example, having Mileena pose as Kitana to get close to Kung Lao, who have a prior relationship established from the episode where he saved Adenia's essence. He used that mutual trust to his advantage, and would have succeeded had Vorpax, a series original, not intervened and caused Mileena to stall until Kitana arrived to prevent the death. He never got directly involved and used what he could to gain an advantage. This, however, was one of his dumber schemes. Taking two rival clans who have a clear disdain for one another and forcing them into an allegiance, where ultimately the prize would lead to them killing one another. It's almost saved by this line.
And then kill yourselves for all I care.
But it ultimately falls short when you realize the expectation that they kill Kung Lao still exists. He basically set up a ticking time bomb that was bound to explode long before his quarry could be caught in the explosion. Ultimately, that's exactly what ends up happening. They get into a fight and Sub-Zero ends up leaving the Lin Kuei and having a redemption arc, and has a battle with Scorpion. I don't consider this that big a black mark on Kahn's characterization up to this point though. It's more just a problem with episodic television in general. I think some premises just aren't cut out for that style of television, and to be honest, apart from a few exceptions, it's really not my cup of tea anyway. The next episode introduces the Koreans, a race of hive women that end up feuding with Kahn on and off screen for the rest of the series. The subplot is pretty stupid, honestly. Who's winning the war keeps changing episode by episode, but it does lead to the developing plot of Kahn's declining mental security, which culminates in the finale where he holds nothing back and finally goes all out. Another noteworthy aspect of this portrayal of Kahn is that we actually get to see how he recruited Shang Tsung into his army. Even the games never really elaborate on what caused him to turn against Earth, and instead just sort of leave it open to interpretation. It's honestly disappointing because there's a lot of potential to be had from this story alone, and we actually get that in Conquest. Shang Tsung was a warrior for Earth learning the ways of combat and sorcery from Master Cho, not to be confused with Bo Raicho. He has an interest in learning the ways of immortality, but Master Cho forbids it. This is a perfect setup for what would eventually become his primary means of magic, prolonging his life by consuming the souls of others. He fights in the Mortal Kombat tournament, likely long before Kung Lao was even born, and breaks the rules by dragging in a spectator to use as a shield from a fatal blow. For this, he is disqualified and taken by Kahn as a prisoner. He's eventually dragged to his throne room, and we watch as Kahn plays on his emotional shortcomings and manipulates him into succumbing to his inner greed. This is honestly a pretty solid scene. It's fairly basic in concept. We see Shang Tsung using a skill his master taught him earlier to see into the souls of others, extracting their secrets with just a glance. He uses this same skill to see Shao Kahn's inner self, and sees more or less what he has inside of himself. Kahn uses that to tempt him, and then uses the Soul Steal technique to entice the sorcerer into abandoning Earthrealm and swearing his allegiance to the Emperor. This is how he gained the secret of immortality and began on the path he would never return from. Like I mentioned a moment ago, there's this developing plot of Kahn becoming increasingly unhinged as he's betrayed multiple times, and his plans continuously fail. It culminates in an episode where Quan Chi puts his foot forward to assist Kahn in the defeat and death of Shang Tsung, who's been working against him since escaping the Koreans after they dragged him out of the cobalt mines. Kahn starts to become rather taken with Quan Chi, likely believing he's finally found a sorcerer to replace Shang Tsung. All that goodwill goes out the window though after a failed assassination attempt from the Netherrealm sorcerer, causing him to be exiled to the cobalt mines. It was later revealed that it was actually Shang Tsung in disguise. The ploy causes Shao Kahn to lose it and start searching for traitors by torturing his men until they confess to crimes they aren't even aware of having committed in the next episode. One of the Shadow Priests suggests a plan to weed out the traitor without any more needless death via executing a loyal soldier to enchant his sword. Now anyone who swears an oath of fealty upon it can be eavesdropped on by the Emperor, but one of the Saurians is able to listen in and inform the actual traitor, Reptile, in time, allowing for them to remove suspicion from themselves before eventually stealing the sword. It's not like Kahn is a complete doofus here either though. Logic tells him Reptile is the most likely choice for the traitor given his people's ability of camouflage, but hearing him profess his loyalty without knowledge that he's aware he's being heard throws Kahn off even further. But after the sword is stolen, all bets are off.
I will have my revenge! I will have my revenge!
This brings us back to the two-part finale I mentioned near the beginning of the video. The cult of Shaka was likely a scheme Kahn had in the works since before meeting Shang Tsung, since before Mortal Kombat was even a thing. As Master Cho mentioned, there had been raids on Earthrealm from Kahn's armies before the tournament was put into place. It demonstrates his scheming nature again. Raiden says he was aware there was a hidden portal in Earthrealm somewhere, likely placed as some form of flanking maneuver to be put to use someday. It just ended up working out in Shao Kahn's favor because it ended up serving as a means to invade Earth after the tournament was put into effect. A countermeasure for a countermeasure. He uses the cult to lure in the heroes, who in turn bring Raiden. Raiden makes them leave, and the finale has them slowly making their way back while Kahn keeps him busy in the Nexus world between the realms, coming full circle as they walk straight into his trap and wind up being killed. This is honestly such a hype concept, and I love seeing Shao Kahn portrayed this way, thinking ahead, using the weaknesses of others against them, which is actually a clever callback as Raiden offered them the same advice a few episodes prior.
I can't. Not the way you need. You know that. But I will say this. Know your enemy. So tell me, do you preach the same message to them that I give to my warriors?
You're rambling. What message?
Know your enemy. Find his weakness. Exploit it.
So to come back to the question of, is this the best depiction of Shao Kahn outside of the main series, it may very well be. What's important when depicting Kahn is establishing his threat level. He should never play second fiddle, and if he does, it should be in a way that keeps his integrity intact. MK11 utterly failed at this, making him a moron who just follows Kronika's plans and never deviates from it until he's beaten halfway through the game and written out of the story. MK1's General Shao is even worse. As bad as Kahn getting beat by Kotal during his first appearance was, General Shao had slightly more build-up only to have all of it come crashing down in the most pathetic way imaginable. After that, he just takes loss after loss until there's nothing left to take seriously. Battle for the Realms didn't fare much better. He's the antagonist for a bulk of the movie, but there's this subplot with Shinnok awakening the One Being, and Kahn ends up eventually being replaced as the villain right at the end. Once again, trying to convince people Shinnok is an upgrade when he most definitely isn't. Fighting the One Being at all being a can of worms I definitely don't feel like going into. Annihilation Kahn had a strong start, but fell apart the instant after he took his mask off and just looked like a normal guy. Also, his face was super goofy throughout most of it, and again, Shinnok wank. He technically didn't steal the antagonist role as the final battle is Liu Kang versus Shao Kahn, but it still rings more hollow with Shinnok basically pulling all of the strings. And I haven't seen Legacy, but, well, I don't really think I need to. Conquest Kahn may not be the most accurate in terms of design, and the performance definitely veers into hammy quite a few times, but there was no mistaking his presence and the weight of every scene he was in. He commanded every single moment of screen time he was given, even when he was acting off of himself. In universe, he also fares pretty well. This story takes place during a time where Kahn was the biggest threat to the realms, and the series respects this fact. There's no bullshit Shinnok twist, no bigger bad guy pulling the strings. It's just the denizens of Earth trying to protect themselves from the greatest threat it currently faces, Shao Kahn. So overall, I really like what this series did with him, and as for whether or not I think it's the best adaptation out there, it's definitely my favorite that I've seen. I don't know of any better ones, so I would have to say that the answer to that question is a resounding yes. This series understands what makes Shao Kahn great, even though the construction constraints of the episodic nature of the series force him to act like a dunce at times, there's never a moment where his threat level or his presence is called into question. Nobody dares to speak out against him except for the only person actually capable of getting away with it, and even she ends up reaping the consequences of what she sowed. Go watch Mortal Kombat Conquest if you like Shao Kahn. You'll like this series. It's also got some absolutely stunning fights that's guaranteed to have you smashing your furniture trying to emulate the crazy stunts you'll see. Thanks for watching, and long live the Emperor.
Outstanding.